We have an awesome project planned for today, so welcome back to Boundless. Hey everyone, hope you guys are having a fantastic day. Today's project is a harbor. It's a pretty big build and will have a bunch of details and space for some extra projects in the future. The harbor will have multiple tiered sections that connect with some of our previous projects, the Iron Forge and the castle. This was a pretty massive undertaking, so let's jump straight into it. The first step is to lay out the bottom deck section with some spruce logs. This part was honestly way tougher than I expected because I wanted to try to keep the space in between each pillar to be 5 blocks, but I also wanted to work with the surrounding terrain, so in some cases, especially at corners, I had to make some compromises. This part of the build is super important as well because each of the following layers' dimensions completely depends on the dimensions of the bottom deck, which you'll kind of see a bit more as we continue building. The main reason for me building this harbor was mostly due to the really cool looking shoreline with the ocean around our base, so I wanted to try to keep as much of that natural shaping as possible. Next up is filling in the bottom deck. Big surprise here, we're using spruce planks for the bottom deck. This is the deck closest to the water and I wanted to make it completely wooden since that's kind of what you would expect for a shipping port. Plus, the wooden dock will serve as a pretty good contrasting color to transition from the blue of the water to the gray in the stone used in the later layers. Then to create a bit of a railing, I used trapdoors on the edges, which gives a small barrier but still gives you pretty easy access to the water, since ships are going to be attached at this level. The deck width also didn't need to be huge since this isn't the main deck area, but kind of more of a transition area between the ships and the rest of the harbor. The finishing touch was to add some dark oak pressure plates on the log pillars to add a bit of extra detail and just kind of break up the spruce color a bit. Next is adding the walls for the next deck. This deck will be the foundation layer for the rest of the harbor, so I made it out of stone bricks trimmed with some chiseled stone bricks. We'll add some extra detailing in the walls later. To break up the stone wall, we added some more log pillars. This is the point where I realized how important it was that we planned out the bottom layer as well as we did, because almost all of the stone block sections ended up working with the same 5 block width, but there were a couple places where I had to add or remove a block. Each layer will be terraced and kind of work its way up, so the height difference between the two decks is only 3 blocks. After filling in some of the air blocks with some dirt, I filled in the floor of the next deck with some stone. Normally I just build a floor and leave the air blocks underneath, but I figured I might as well fill everything in with some dirt, and that way we don't have to worry about dealing with any mobs or anything. Again, we'll add some detail to the floor in a little bit, but by adding a stone floor as opposed to spruce, there's kind of something different on every layer. For the last layer, I added some stone pillars with ideally a 5 block gap, but again, some of those early design choices that we made kind of created some problem areas, but I think I was able to make everything work in the end. I also slightly wish I made the stone floor a bit wider in some places since some of the later detailing became pretty tough, but I still think it turned out fine. For this section I used some brick stairs to make the pillars look a little bit nicer and made the top layer out of alternating chiseled and stone bricks. Then to break up the wall even more, I filled in the space between each pillar with some spruce planks. I also added some lanterns on each pillar to not only light up the area, but also kind of cap off the final layer. Then on top of the wall I added a brick railing which kind of separates this layer from the rest. After adding some stairs to move between each deck, I filled in the floor of the top layer with spruce slabs. This will be where a lot of the buildings and other details are, so some of it will be changed in the future, but the spruce planks makes this top layer feel the most refined and kind of more like a living area as opposed to a working area like the lower decks. I really like the 3 sections and think it looks super cool to kind of have different sections that all have their own purpose for the rest of the harbor. Plus it kind of preserves some of the natural shaping that was there before we built a bunch of stuff on top of the land. Like I mentioned before, I finally got around to breaking up the stone floor with some andesite, bricks, and cobble just to add more detail. It's always super tough for me to make random looking designs, and it seems like everyone has their own way of doing it. But for me, the easiest way is to start with the base block and then go over the floor each time, replacing some of the base with whatever detail block you want, in the order of the most similar to the least similar. One of the really cool things about this build is that I tried to build around a naturally generated sunken ship, which at first I was considering replacing with a real ship, but I think it's super cool to leave something naturally generated there since it fits so well with the rest of the build. To start some of the actual detail building, at the end of the sort of stone pier section, I added some barrels, chests, and note blocks, which just kind of looks like some cargo that was unloaded off of a ship. Eventually we'll probably put a giant ship in the open water section, but I couldn't just leave the pier empty, so I think this was a pretty nice touch. Then in the walls to break up the spruce planks, I used a similar technique to what we used in the Iron Forge roof by using some stripped spruce logs to add some extra texture. It's a super subtle change, but it definitely makes the wall look a lot less boring. Then on the deck side by the abandoned ship, I put another cargo section, again with some barrels and chests, but this time I added some log piles, which is kind of similar to what we had in the sawmill build. This again just adds some detail to the dock and kind of makes it look like it's actually in use as opposed to just an empty floor. While I do some extra terraforming, a quick reminder that, as always, there's a hidden emerald block somewhere in this video. The first person to find the block and put the location and timestamp into the comment section gets VIP on the Twitch channel for a month. It seems like you guys have been getting pretty good at finding them, so I'm just gonna have to keep making them harder to find. Now that we've finished building the main dock section, it's time to add some of the buildings on and around the dock. This is another project that we'll probably keep adding on over the next couple of weeks as we kind of decide what we need or what would look best. The first building I decided to add was a shed that holds some of the cargo that may have just been offloaded. Sticking to the deck below it, this shed will hold a bunch of lumber that kind of sort of ties in with the sawmill build as well. The shed build is pretty simple and just uses the same roof design that we used for the Iron Forge, although since the building is a lot smaller, the roof obviously had to be scaled down quite a bit. I also forgot to mention this earlier, but the dock design is based around a YouTuber's 100k build special that he did, where he built a giant port city. It's a pretty cool project and was part of what inspired me to start this project. As always, the link is in the description, so feel free to check it out. The top layer is going to eventually have a ton of buildings, and probably be a good place to put a lot of our farms and automation. So I ended up setting aside a pretty large floor area. This was one of the places where the natural terrain was pretty far off from where the floor was, so terraforming around it is a pretty big issue and is gonna definitely need some touching up on in the future. However, on the other side of the harbor, the top layer fits pretty perfectly with the ground, so that might be a good place to transition to a new area of our base if we need it. Plus, it slightly gets us out of the spruce taiga biome that has all that gross podzol. The last big part of today's harbor build is building a crane. This one was really fun to build and the end product is pretty sweet. I originally was going to put the crane a little closer to the stone pier, but I found this corner area that seemed to be perfect for the crane base, so I basically just started off with some log pillars, which supports a stone foundation for the crane. A lot of the builds we've done so far have been in a sort of medieval style, so I wanted to make sure that the crane fit the theme and didn't look too modern or anything. So that basically just means a lot of wood and stone for the crane. The good news is that there are a ton of wooden blocks like fences, trapdoors, stairs, and logs that added some great detail to the crane and made it recognizable, especially from long distances. After adding a couple extra details on and around the crane, I figured that put the harbor in a pretty good place to be shown off, so as always, enjoy the viewing montage. I don't know about you guys, but I love how the harbor turned out. There's obviously a lot of work to do, and the cool thing is there's so much space for more buildings. But thank you guys for checking out the build, and make sure to let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't already, make sure to hit the sub button so you don't miss out on any episodes. Smack the like button, and I'll see you guys next week for another episode. Thanks for watching.